All right, so in Unit 6, we are taking a brief break from multiplying and dividing using different strategies, and we're looking at how to take data, okay? And data is just information that's been collected, how to take data and how to display it. Now, there are different ways to display data, and sometimes you have to think about, well, how much data do I have, and what am I using the data for? So can you think of any ways to display data? Think real quick. How can you show information? Like, if you collect information of any sort, how can you show it? Okay, so some of you might be thinking some things that are different than line plots, which is totally fine. Maybe you're thinking something like bar graphs. I know you use those a lot. In younger grades, you learn about those. Maybe something like a pie chart. There's ones that start with line also, but they're called line graphs, which are different than line plots. Okay, so those are just some ways that you might show data. Today, we are zooming in on another way, one that you might not be familiar with, and it's called a line plot. And to plot is kind of to place something somewhere. And so if you think about that, to plot is to place something. That might help make sense, okay? So it shows frequency or data along a number line. So I started us out by putting this horizontal line. And the way I always remember it's the horizontal line is people always say the sun sets on the horizon, okay? And I picture that being the horizon. Maybe you're at the ocean and that's in the horizon, okay? So I always think about that's the horizon. So this type of line, this number line, is a horizontal line. An x-axis runs in this direction, okay? So anyway, and if we really want to make it a line, we could make arrows on both sides. By the way, I'm a little late to saying this, but I am writing, I was able to print this, and I'm writing. If you cannot print it, then you should be taking a blank piece of paper and taking these exact notes with me. You might have to pause along the way, but we do expect that these are in your math notebook, okay? And nice and organized, please. So anyway, there's some data here. Now, this data doesn't have a title yet, so I think that we should title it and make sense of what it is, because right now it just looks like a bunch of fractions. So I am going to say that I am training for a half marathon, okay, which is not entirely true because I'm not right now, but I have before. And this is, these are the miles Miss Slacky ran. Okay, maybe in the month of like April, okay? So if these are the miles I ran, you can see I went on a bunch of different runs. You can actually see I went on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 different runs, okay? Which makes sense. In a month, I didn't run every day, but I ran 16 different times, okay? Sometimes I ran the same amount. For instance, I see a 7.5 here, and I see a 7.5 here, and sometimes I ran different amounts. Like this day I ran 7.5, but this day I only ran 5.5. Maybe I was tired, or maybe I just didn't want to run as far, or I didn't have time, okay? So making sense of our data is important before we even plot it or place it on our graph, okay? So now we're ready to plot our data. But I want you to think about something. When you look at all of these numbers, do you see any zeros, ones, twos, threes, fours? No. So on my number line, does it make sense to start with 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4? No. The lowest number I see, the smallest number I see is a 5. So I am going to start my number line at a 5. Now it's a line. That means there are lower numbers that you could do, but not in our data, there's not, okay? I also want to think about what am I counting by? So I see a lot of whole numbers like 5, but I also see a lot of half numbers like 6.5, 5.5, 7.5. So I think I'm going to count up 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, and let's see how high am I going? What's the highest number in this set of data? 7.5 seems to be the biggest number. So when we count by 5s, let's spread them out sorry, not count by fives, count starting by fives by halves. So 5, spread it out a little, 5.5. Spread it out the same distance, 6, 6.5. 7, so all my 7s would go there, 7.5. Okay, and so now I have the smallest amount of data in my data set, and I have the largest amount of data in my data set, and I have the amounts in between that, so I can easily plot or place this data. Okay, so next up is us plotting it. So you really want to make sure you don't miss data and that you don't double plot. So I don't put 7.5 and forgot I did it and then put it again, okay? So I'm going to show you a tip for that. A tip is just very simple, cross out as you go. So 7.5, I'm going to cross it out here and I'm going to plot it. Now, each plot, each piece of data represents an X, or is represented by an X. So instead of putting 7.5 in this random list of data, I'm going to take that 7.5 and I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to put all my 7.5s here. So that 7.5 right here that I was just looking at, cross it out. Let's just put a nice neat X here. That is that piece of data on this line plot. It's plotted data, okay? 5.5, going to do the same thing. Instead of up here on this random list, let's just put it nice and neat there. Now that X represents my 5.5 miles that day. 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Ooh, I did 6.5 again. So I'm going to put another, because I did 6.5 here, that's that one, and here, that's that one. 7. Okay, I'm going to go a little faster. 6. Making sure I don't overdo any. I just did 6, but look, I have another 6. Cross it out, plot it. 7.5, cross it out, plot it. 7. 5. That's our first 5. 7.5. 5.5. 5. 5.5. 6. And 5. Okay, so one way you can check is that I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 pieces of data in my data set. I should have 16 pieces of data plotted. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Phew. So I didn't miss any or overdo any. So now when I look at this, I want you to think, what are the advantages, and ignore the bottom of the page, what are the advantages of, instead of putting the information or the data like this, what are the pluses or the good things about a data plot? I'm sorry, a line plot. And I can't help but think, well, this is nice and organized. I can see easily I ran 5 miles 3 times. I ran 5.5 miles 3 times. I ran 6 miles 3 times. Okay, I can easily see that. Whereas this was kind of in random, it was just kind of all mashed together, and it wasn't easy for my eyes to make sense. So literally, when my eyes look at this data, it kind of all makes sense. When I understand it, it kind of seems to be nice and organized. Okay, so that is the purpose of a line plot. It's good for, you don't want to put hundreds of pieces of information on a line plot. It's good for a small amount of data so that you can easily analyze it, okay? So tomorrow we're going to learn more, but today I wanted you to learn what it looks like, how to plot the data, how to read the data, how each piece of data is represented by an X, how we can start to think about what numbers we use across the number line, how we give it a title, okay, so we know what the data is about, okay? Tomorrow, we are going to take this same notebook insert, and when we start, it's going to look like this, and we're going to learn new vocabulary, range, median, and mode. But today, don't even worry about that, okay? So you are going to move on to the next task in the lesson plan for today. And so this is hopefully a nice, easy intro to line plots, and tomorrow we'll take it just a little bit further. All right, good job.